To read ahead in my notes. Oh, my started already? Okay. She gave me no hint. She just walked away. I guess she gave up on the waiting. Thanks for joining us online. Thanks for joining us in person. Really appreciate you being here. You gonna make it? Welcome to our continuing discipleship conversation. Walk through the Bible. Um, let's see. We're not really doing a review. We're gonna have a conversation this week about a book of the Bible that almost no one ever preaches from. We quote it sometimes, like completely out of context. I am my beloved, and He is mine. Do you remember that? Did you ever sing that? Uh, was that a was that like a children's church or Sunday school song that we sang? I am my beloved, and He is mine. It comes from Song of Songs. Um, this also is, yeah. Is that the name of the song? His banner over me is love. Yeah, comes from Song of Songs.
Nope, didn't say
Yeah. Anyway, uh, so love is our topic um, tonight. It's really sexuality, but love, because it's really a challenging position. So let's have this conversation. Love that. Hi, how you doing? This
that.
is
It just made me feel really uncomfortable.
um, this particular topic. I think having experience in youth group. Uh, we were youth pastors for several years. We did youth ministry for a long time, but we were youth pastors for several years before stepping into full time. That's not even true. Not even full time, but stepping into lead pastor um, work. And so having an extensive experience with high school and college and career age people who many of them not married. Uh, this is a place of magnificent struggle, overwhelming struggle, like continual. You have a lot of the same conversations, um, and so it begs the question of: are we doing something wrong?
We, the church,
Yeah, we as the
the
Big C
people.
church. Like, are we struggling somewhere because this conversation and this interaction back and forth in the book of Song of Songs is it's uncomfortable,
hmm
right? Um, so, what are ways that people approach and deal with this? I'm skipping ahead. We're gonna get to that. This particular book, um, some Bibles may have it as Song of Solomon. It is Song of Songs. Many people attribute it to Solomon. Uh, no one agrees that that is the case, that it was actually written by Solomon. There's no uh, there's no literary or historical evidence that this was written by Solomon. It may have been written to Solomon. It may have been compiled by Solomon. It may have been written for Solomon. We're not really sure. But, so Song of Songs. Matter of fact, the heading in verse 1 says what?
The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Oh wait, the heading: Solomon's love for a Shulamite girl.
No. That.
What? I don't know.
The start of verse 1.
Oh,
What you
the
just
Song
said.
of Songs, which is Solomon's.
Which is. It's good. I'm just flipping through.
Oh.
Don't.
No, I don't know.
Yeah. And that's where the Hebrew of that doesn't actually translate. It can. There's a lot to that. Anyway.
I feel like this is a play.
It does
That's how
write
it
as a
reads.
play and a back and forth between a woman, which it's written as a Shulamite woman.
Yeah.
And so the first marriage that Solomon was given to, do we know who it was to? Anybody?
We talked about it.
It was a princess or a queen, but she was not from Shulam. She was from Egypt.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about this being Solomon's story of his first love,
Whoa.
well, this conversation between his first love and then we're talking about a wife from Shulam, not a wife from Egypt, and that's why there's a whole lot of debate and conversation as to whether this is actually written by Solomon or to Solomon anyway, or like so. It's why I'm not referring to it as Song of Solomon. It is Song of Songs, also known as Song of Solomon, depending on your
Oh my gosh. Just let
Bible. Anyway, so there's some pretty steamy things in here in the whole book of Song of Songs. The 8 chapters ends on a I thought there'd be like some type of conclusion here, but it doesn't. It just ends, and you're like, okay. If you were to guess of the 3 sections of the Tanakh, what are the 3 sections of the Tanakh, Chelsea? What is the Tanakh? What does that mean?
the law, prophets, and writings.
So what is that? That's the Old Testament.
I mean the Old Testament.
The Tanakh is the
but
Jewish
it's
term
broken
for the
into
Old
sections,
Testament.
and it's the law, the prophets, and the writings.
So what does that mean? What are those 3 sections called?
The Tanakh.
Tanakh is the whole.
Okay, the Torah, the something else, and
T
something
is
else.
Torah.
Yeah.
The N is the Nevi'im,
Oh yeah.
and that is the
prophets.
The prophets, and we're going to get to those.
And
then the K,
Ketuvim.
the Ketuvim,
It's close.
and that would be the writings. Yeah. And now the New Testament often refers to the law and the prophets, and they're referring to what?
I don't remember.
The law and the prophets.
Oh, literally?
The Torah and
Oh, you wanted me to say
Nevi'im.
that? Why? I feel like that was a trick question. So confused.
So when they reference the law and the prophets, they're talking about Torah and Nevi'im, those books. And the Ketuvim, the writings, they were later on. And we are going to talk about one that's actually in the Ketuvim that we talked about on a Sunday morning. Do you remember what book it is? That does not find itself in the prophets, that we immediately go, oh, that is absolutely a prophetic book. But it's found right here in the writings.
Is that Daniel? That's Daniel, yeah.
Yes. It is the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel referenced here in the Ketuvim. So, good young Jewish boys, they did what? Once they were 5, they started reading.
They memorized the
started
Torah.
memorizing Scripture. They started memorizing the Torah, and they started working their way through the law. Once they got through the law, they started with the prophets and then got into the writings. Until they hit bar mitzvah, they weren't allowed to read or memorize the book of Song of Songs. That's how sexualized the Jewish people see this writing. And there are people who view this book as is it allegory? Anyway, as this descriptive work that is describing the relationship of God and His people. And while that's not wrong, there's clearly I don't I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I don't imagine I struggle with imagining Jesus having a conversation and referring to people's breasts, which is referenced here.
It's totally there.
It's here. And so how do we in our history in youth ministry, how did we deal with this? How did we?
We did not.
Okay, is that a fair assumption of like that's
Oh, that's that's a majority rule. right
so? Most people don't talk about it at all.
there. I mean, you are struggling right now in a room
Yeah,
full of adults, so I
and
can
it's
only imagine why
uncomfortable.
we didn't talk about it in youth group.
Okay, so what is the other alternative that generally happens? We struggle with talking about it at all, or then what's our other approach? Not talking too much about it, but that is definitely. But how else do people approach it?
Is it on the board?
No,
Oh, bummer.
focus right here.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah,
Is it on the board?
no.
Oh, bummer. Okay, again. How else? I have no idea. How else do
So
people
people
approach
either
it?
don't talk about it at all, or they just tell young people, especially, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. This is terrible. Move on.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know that we've ever
sex
had a.
is bad.
Oh, this or like. Okay, I don't know.
Sexuality, Song of Songs, like that is the whole conversation.
Okay, I didn't know that was like you were wrapping it all together.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
I mean, isn't that the conversation practically?
Pretty much.
True love waits. Like that whole conversation is don't have sex before you're married.
I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, but yeah.
But do we do so much of not talking about sexuality and telling people how bad it is before they're married that we've stigmatized it? By the time they get married, they're like, this isn't okay. Like they don't know how to have.
There's no healthy relationship with it.
Yeah. So how do we engage that awkward conversation, because it's awkward for everybody,
Yeah.
and have a meaningful embrace of the reality that God places here in front of us? Because God's obviously not scared of the conversation, because he
Wrote. Well,
it's
I mean,
here.
it's there. Yeah.
And so how do we do this? I do have to. This is the type of conversation and the type of happening, I guess, an exploration that gets many people fired.
Subject matter.
The subject matter, yes, from pastors, teachers, all kinds of different people in all kinds of different spaces. You say the wrong thing, especially around sexuality, and you end up losing your job. You end up saying the wrong thing or offending somebody for some
which I feel
reason.
like is such an unfair thing, because like, how do you know it's the wrong thing? Because nobody was willing to talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, how do you know it's wrong? How do you know that that specific way is sensitive if nobody's willing to talk about any specific way?
And so at some point, we have to be able to have these conversations, and then I think the other thing that we do, that really puts people in a tough spot, is we have these conversations, and especially with younger people, but I mean I don't know that matters. We'll quote the scripture from Paul. He's like, it's better to burn with passion, right, than to stay single. And he's
No, that's not what it says.
better to burn with passion.
No.
That's what he says. Go ahead, you tell me.
Hold on. I'm trying to think.
I'm waiting.
I feel like you're saying it backwards. It's better to be married than to burn with passion.
Yes, you're right.
Because you were saying it's better to burn with passion than it is to be single.
It's better to be married than to burn with passion. So we talk to people and we're like, well, don't burn with passion. Go find you a good husband. Go find you a good wife, a good man or a good woman. Get married, and everything will be better. We present it like, well, you're going to be incomplete if you're not married. But some people aren't. That's not God's intention for them, or whatever. But just because a person isn't married
So as opposed to talking about it, we press marriage on people.
Yes.
I say we, I mean, it's just the general we, I
Right.
guess. But, instead of talking about a sensitive subject like sexuality, which is how we were created.
Right.
I mean, we were created to be sexual beings. It just is what it is. And I think that if we had conversation around just the matter of fact of that's how God created us, and it's such a perfect creation because
Yes.
He didn't make a mistake in that. But then instead of being able to talk about that subject, we press people and say, well, just get married. Don't burn with passion. Get married. But then it's like, well, good luck with that because, well, marriage is hard. And,
Yeah.
all those things that come with that. And then we're like, why are
Don't
these people...
burn with passion. I think I want to marry this person. Well, you better pick smart because you're going to fight with somebody the rest of your life.
I know. It's like all this advice flying around everywhere. But I feel like we drive people in circles as opposed to just being able to have the conversation from the beginning.
Yeah. And I think just because a person isn't married doesn't mean they're imperfect or they don't understand or anything like that. It just it's a different step. It's a different place in life. And you're not incomplete if you're not married.
Right.
And you're not complete if you are married.
Yeah.
So oh, it is right here. Most common way that we instruct is don't. We list all the don'ts. We're like, oh, this is what the Ten Commandments say. Thou shalt not. But that's not how they start. So the question then becomes, how does the Bible interact? How does the Bible approach sexuality?
That's a great question, Kirk. How does the Bible
because
approach
if
that?
if our intention is to be more like Christ, and if we would understand how do we interact with Christ and how do we take that relationship and understand our call to be priesthood, a kingdom of priests, and that God wants an intimate, exclusive relationship with us. And how does that translate into our personal relationships, whether it be person to person or in intimate sexual relationships with our spouse? If those things, if knowing who we are then influences all of those other things, it would change the way we have the conversation, because at some point, we have 4 kids, 3 that are in adolescence. At some point, we want them to have a healthy relationship and to have a fulfilled relationship. So how do we instruct them in a way that they can lean into the right way of doing things? And I think if we take the approach of the Bible and the information here, then it may help us. So let's talk about love. Because perfect love, the Bible says, casts out all fear. And so where does love and what is it? There are actually 3 words for love. Rhea is the first form of love. It's very basic. Everybody thought I was going agape. That's not. That's Greek, not Hebrew. Hebrew, Rhea. Rhea havta. Rhea, Rhea havta.
I don't know. You didn't write it down.
Yeah, I think that's it. Anyway, the reason I'm going here, Rhea is neighborly love. So love your neighbor as yourself. That expression, that conversation, Rhea is about neighborly love. And when God speaks of having this relationship to love your neighbor as yourself. Um, this rhea is a neighborly love. It is a when we're talking about a sexual nature to it, or sexuality between two people, it is like this poetic, romantic feeling love. That's what rhea love is. So we have this experience. We are very popular. This is very popular in young people and college age kids. They want to go have an experience. This is the dating relationship. Ooh, I love you because we have done all these things together. So raya is the experience of togetherness, neighborliness, this having common experiences and having the stirring up of the feelings, the butterflies.
Okay.
This is rhea. Um, Most often in our American culture, this comes first. Yes?
In relationship?
Yes.
Yeah.
When people are dating, they tend to date someone where they have connected socially. This is that space. Rhea. The next one is ahava. Reahavta has ahava in it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Ahavta is where the end of this statement is. Love your neighbor. Reahavta. Shockingly enough, God tells us to love our neighbor. Rea, to love our neighbor. Ahavta, ahava, ahava is the second form of love, and it is love of commitment. This is um, this is the marriage vow love. This is regardless of anything that's going on, I'm committed to remaining. So shockingly enough, our neighborly love is supposed to be one that refuses to quit, regardless of what the neighbor does.
Wow.
This is where we struggle. We skip over this most often in our American culture. We get the feelings and the experience, but the commitment, we're like, well, that comes with marriage.
Does it though? Like for all people, you know what I mean?
Well, and it doesn't for all people.
Right.
And we struggle with that, I think. Um, is the divorce rate for people who grow up in church different from the divorce rate of people who don't?
It is, isn't it? It's not any different.
It's almost identical.
Oh, it's if people live together or don't live together.
Yeah.
That's when it's different.
Yeah, if a young person uh has multiple sexual partners and lives with more than one person of the opposite sex before getting married, they're like 6 times more likely to for their first and second marriages to end in divorce. Um, if a young person has one or fewer sexual partners and never lives with a person of the opposite sex before they get married, and they get married young, by young, I mean the average age of a person who of a woman right now in America, the average marriage age of a woman in America right now is 28, and the average age of a man is 30. And if they go to college, it's 2 years later. So if a young woman goes to school and finishes a 4-year degree, on average, she's getting married at 30. If at all. And the young man, if they go to college, get a 4-year degree, their average age at marriage is 32. So they're struggling with this sexuality conversation from puberty, 12, 13 years old, until marriage and beyond.
Did we
But
have 4 kids by the time you were 32?
I
How
think
old?
so. He was 30. I was 30 with him. No,
Yeah.
I wasn't. No, I wasn't.
31. How old
I
are you
was
now?
older than 30 when he was born.
He's 37?
go.
Okay, thank you. 'Cause I can't remember.
So I was 32 when he was
Yeah.
born.
That's wild.
So, yeah. Anyway,
Man,
so we're talking
that's a long wait.
20 years that people are struggling with this desire that God's placed inside of us.
Right.
Like, we were made to be sexual beings.
Right.
This is part of who we are. And so we have young people who were struggling with this conversation. So they're going out to figure out stuff on their own for 20 years before they have.
Well, you know what I think is interesting? That when this all was written, marriages were all arranged
Yes.
already. So there were these
Oh,
young
yeah, this is
men
good.
who had families, and that's what they were, like you would be getting Nicholas prepared to do whatever it is you're doing, and in a few years,
Yeah.
we would be going to another family and saying, someone Lauren and Sawyer's age, and saying, hey, this is the daughter that we pick for him, or the wife we pick for him.
At what point in this conversation, at what point was the young woman on the market and being negotiated for her hand in marriage?
Before that.
At what point?
What do you mean? Age-wise? What are you talking about?
There's a certain position in life that signals.
At her first menstrual cycle.
Yes, at puberty, at the onset of puberty is when she would have been available, and the father would have started negotiating for her hand in marriage.
So I feel
And
like
that family
in that
partnership.
scenario, it takes out so much of everything that we're talking about now. It wasn't even a thing because it was all already arranged.
And so
that doesn't mean there weren't issues and problems, but I feel like there may have been less. They were usually.
Most of the men were older. Yeah, there was usually a pretty significant age gap between the male and female. Well, because in their culture, however many children you had
was dependent on.
Well, however many children you had was the value of your home, basically.
Right.
The earning capacity of your home is how many men actually, how many young boys you ended up having. Yeah, you got to figure that stuff out. Yeah, normally that'd be around age 30 in the Jewish tradition, in the Eastern tradition. Yeah. Well, and so there would have been a couple things there, and this is what I was going to say. If the value of the home is in how many kids you can have, and specifically how many young men you're going to have, then for a young lady, once she's at a point of childbearing, then in their culture, producing offspring, but in reality, how do I say this and not be offensive?
Just say that.
In reality, much like today, there's no, like, when you're talking about a 15, 16-year-old young woman, a 15 or 16-year-old young man in the same culture is of almost no value.
Right.
To be able to actually provide for that young woman. Much is the same case today.
Right.
Like, you have no world experience. You have no understanding. You have no establishment of any kind to move in a specific direction at 15, 16 years old. Especially as a young man in today's society.
Right.
No different from back then. All is your family to take care of stuff. And matter of fact, even at age 30 in their culture, the husband was still welcoming his new bride into his father's house.
Right.
Like, he wasn't going and living on his own and creating their own space. He was adding a room onto the house, and until the father of the groom said, "This I think will work," it wasn't happening.
Right.
Even if the bride price had been negotiated, even if everybody was committed. So I got off track here. You pushed me ahead. That's fine. That's great conversation. We're going to come back to it. So Rhea is
Committed.
no
No. Oh, the first one, neighborly.
neighborly love,
Experience.
which is experience and feelings.
Mhm.
Second one is ahava, which is
Committed.
committed. I'm committed regardless of any situation.
How I feel.
The third one is dode. This is
Oh,
sexual
I
intimacy.
thought it was Dodd.
Dode. This one speaks specifically of sexual intimacy. This particular form of the word love is almost the exclusive one used in the Song of Songs.
Well, no wonder they say it's just so risque.
When you read the word dode, when you read the word love, yeah. We don't establish it that way. We would all these things would be translated love, and we'd read them in the English language and be like, well, that's love. Like, what kind of love? But in the Jewish text, they go, you see that thing that says dode? We should not let young men read that. Because they don't know how to handle that. They don't know how to, they're not prepared to lead their family in this way because they don't have one and they don't know what this looks like. They need to know how to have this experience of love. The steadfast love of God is an experience love. In most of the translations, it's that Rhea, experience love. And then most of the Psalms, it flips. And the steadfast love that's there is almost always ahava. So we hear about this experience and we hear about this steadfast, this commitment, and then we get this dode, this sexual intimacy. And so the question is, what order do we put them in? And what order do we experience them in?
These three?
So
Know what you're asking?
Yes, in our culture today, how does this go?
Oh, I think it's all over the place.
Most commonly, yeah, especially in, I'll skip high school so as not to offend too many people, especially in the college and young adult world and the ever growing 18 to 30-year-old group of people who are careered people that aren't settled down. It is very much Rhea Dode, and they feel like this is obsolete. There is a very big group of people under 30 that think, oh, this is a social construct that we have put together that is
Well, and
not
I think
meaningful.
they also feel like these two are the same thing.
Maybe they do.
That they're not.
Yeah. There's nothing special about this.
Right.
It's just an act.
It's an experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that healthy?
No.
Are we okay with that being the portrayal? Because, like, every Hollywood movie portrays it that way.
Right.
Are we okay with that being the portrayal that leads our young people into adulthood and this ever-extending adolescent period that centuries ago, not even centuries ago, I would say, Dad, how old were your parents when they got married? 17, 18?
Well, his mom was 18 when she had him.
I mean,
Yeah.
Were your parents married young? Nick. I mean,
We were 19 and 21.
but 60, 70.
How old were you, Loretta?
17.
Yeah.
Pastor Dacus was 16, I think. Barely 17.
When they met.
No.
Not when they
They
got
were
married.
14 when they met. They had to go to Texas to get a marriage license like 2 days before. Pastor Dacus and Miss Vicky. I probably shouldn't have said that online, but
But you did.
I don't think his mother still knows. I don't think she's never going to see this. His mother still doesn't know. 2 days before their actual wedding in Oklahoma, they found out that he was too young. Like, she was 17, so her parents could sign for her, but he had to be 18. His parents couldn't sign for him. Not in Oklahoma. So they had to go 2 days before their wedding in Oklahoma and get a marriage license in Texas.
There's no way I would let Nicholas get married right now.
And they got
There's
everything
no
because
way.
they didn't need a signature and everything, and he didn't have the nerve to tell his mom. So they were
Oh my
legally married for 2
goodness.
days before they had their wedding ceremony. And their marriage certificate and everything was already signed because it had to be done in Texas because Oklahoma wouldn't let them do it at the time.
Oh, man.
So it was quite a thing. I remember hearing that story so many times. So now everybody knows. Don't tell them.
I was trying to say it out of the microphone. He's all like,
Anyway, so yeah. But this was so normal. 50, 60 years ago, it was very, very normal for 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids to be getting married and starting families.
okay, but what was 50 years ago?
70s.
Okay, well, let's think about even 60 years ago. If you go back to like Vietnam and all those young guys were going, they felt like they were old enough to go and fight in a war. They were definitely old enough to get married.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like, I don't know, like I don't want Nick to go and fight a war. I definitely don't want him to get married right now. I don't feel
I'm
like they're
just
mature
saying.
enough anymore. I feel like we've just gone way down. Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh,
No
man.
way. Just wave the white flag at this point because
I'm just saying.
they wouldn't make it.
So there's a couple questions that I have about that. Are we letting them off the hook by not
Having the
giving
conversation.
them, not having the tough conversations and pushing them? Because there's very few. I spend time around young people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few that I would be like, I will put my life in your hands.
Gosh, yeah.
I'm talking
Anything.
physical commitment. I trust you enough to put my life in your hands.
No.
I mean, have you seen how some of them? Have you seen how some of these kids drive? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
So currently,
All
in the
out of
American culture, we kind of these two. Ancient Eastern culture, which one comes first?
I feel like the commitment comes first. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, because of what we just talked about. Oh, is that how I jumped ahead?
So
Sorry.
we've got this committed marriage.
We didn't even talk about this before. I just was on the right wave.
This is true.
It's true. We didn't talk about it.
So you get this arranged marriage, which we're all like, ugh.
Oh, no. I'm
Okay,
like all for
all
that
right.
anymore.
All right.
Now that I have kids and they're growing up, I'm like,
So you have this arranged
who
marriage
do I want to
that's,
share grandkids
that's
with?
negotiated.
I think about that.
We get this arranged marriage that's negotiated, and the groom and the father of the groom come to the bride and to the father of the bride's home, and he brings this cup. The father brings it out and pours wine in it, hands it to the groom, and the groom offers it and says, "This is a covenant a new covenant that I'm making with you. And I'm not going to drink of this covenant again until I drink it with you anew. And it's an offer of marriage. And they've made this whole, and the bride at this point has the choice to receive that and take it and be committed, or to reject it. And here's the thing. We don't have any recorded time where the woman rejects it, but did it happen? Who knows?
Maybe. I don't know.
But she's receiving this covenant and accepting it and committing herself and her family for the rest of her life to a guy she doesn't even know.
Well, and she might know him.
And she probably knows his family and may know of him, and she may have seen him at different social gatherings, but they did not have any experience. They didn't go bowling together. They didn't go catch a movie together, because in their culture, completely unacceptable.
Right.
And so they became committed first, and what comes next? Dode. Because after that exchanging of the covenant, groom and father of the groom leave. And they go start building a space. By they, I mean groom does. And father is like, has his last little bit of hard teaching opportunity. Oh, is this the type of work you're going to put into your marriage? This isn't going to work. You're going to tear it all down and start back over. I mean, that type of stuff. And then whenever everything gets together, father says, all right, it's time. Let's go get your bride. He gathers up the groom's party, and they start coming in, and somebody rides ahead of them with the shofar and blows the horn, and father of the bride, and all the wedding party better be ready, because it's time to party. And when the groom gets there and the bride gets there and they exchange their vows, it's time to consummate the marriage.
And it's really about seeing how the bride's family has held up their end.
Yeah, they're all ready.
Because the commitment on the groom's end was to build the house.
That's right.
But the commitment on the bride's end was to stay pure.
And then, so sexual intimacy, the dode comes after that.
Yeah.
And then they have a honeymoon, and hopefully this figures itself out.
Yeah.
Hopefully they get to know each other and have experience and a likeness and actually get along.
Yeah.
But they're committed, and now if you have these two and this doesn't work out, it can be pretty rough. Right? Even in their culture. Like this could be if was it David and Michael, which Saul ended up giving anyway. That would not go well. They definitely did not have neighborly affection towards one another. So, in their culture, that can definitely go wrong. In our culture, even if this waits, we can still get stuff out of order. So, is it possible, or even probable, for a relationship to survive or thrive without all three?
I think it's possible to survive. I don't know if it's going to thrive.
Yeah. So this is where Song of Songs is so important. This conversation of sexuality and this fire. Rob Bell did a Numa video way back when, like 2003, 2004.
I thought we didn't like Rob Bell.
Anyway, it's been 19 years ago. It's been a while. But
he's a little weird.
He did a conversation about these three things, And he talked about each one of them as a flame,
Yeah.
as a burning flame. And if all of them are together, then he had this. By the time he's done with the conversation, it's like a 10-minute video. By the time he's done with the conversation, it's like a raging wildfire behind him.
And like for real one?
Yes, for real.
Oh wow.
He
Okay.
took lighters and added the fire and combined them, and it just. But alone, if you only have dode, if sexual intimacy is all you have,
Mm-hmm.
if that goes out, there's nothing left.
Right.
And if neighborly experience is all you have, and that's the flame, and that's all that's burning, and you don't have any of the other things, you don't have commitment, and you don't have long-term sexual intimacy, then if that goes out. But if you have all of them together, and say you go a season where you don't have a lot of personal experience together, maybe you're both going in separate directions. Shockingly enough, if you're not married and you happen to be to this point in the conversation, God bless you, first of all. Second of all, shocking, like, just spoiler alert, at some point in your married life, if you choose to get married, at some point in your married life, you and your spouse will be doing all kinds of things and feel like you just cross paths. And so there's going to be seasons in your marriage where you're like, we don't ever see each other or do anything together. I don't even know who you are. Great to meet you today. I've seen you in passing once every 6 days or something. Like, there are seasons, and there are demands in life that have these different requirements. If that's the only thing that is keeping your fire of marriage burning, and you go through a season where that's out, it's a cold night.
Yeah.
And that cold season can turn into a relationship that doesn't make it. And so the other two fires have to be burning in order for that one to have the ability to relight and the fire to not go out altogether.
I'm kind of disappointed you don't have real fire right now.
Real fire. Anyway. And so
I think we already covered that.
Already
I
covered
didn't
that.
even know that was written on the board because I don't read ahead of time. So
And so this should encourage us in the way that we interact with this Song of Songs. It's okay for us to have imperfect conversations.
mm-hmm.
We should thrive in places that the world is challenged. And shockingly enough, the world's way of going about this leaves regret and emptiness and hurt and pain. And the solution is a godly approach of a holistic conversation about sexuality and love. Now, whether that be a person who chooses to get married young or a person who chooses to get married later, when our young people and even adults are having struggles and questions about this, about sexuality and how do we approach this and how do we interact with this, we can point them in the direction of a healthy balance of neighborly affection and relationship, a commitment one to another, that regardless of anything else, I'm going to remain. And the thing is, if we will learn those two things, then at some point, there's going to be a person who we want to share dode with.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be able to remain steadfast in a long-term relationship with them. I believe that is the best way. And it is a godly design of how we should be conversing with and leading our young people into this conversation of sexuality. And it is a safe and healthy way for us to lead people in the direction of getting to know who God is, Because this is who God is. He's called us to know him, to experience him. That's what the book of Genesis says. It says he uh, called Abram and even spoke to Moses, and he said, "Come and experience me. Let's have this experience together. Let's have this time together. Get to know who I am," which is Reah. And he says, "I'm not going anywhere. Choose to follow me and me alone. Leave those other things and say, I'm yours, I'm here, we're together." And that we get to Mount Sinai, yes? The 10 Commandments, the 10 words, the 10 vows that God makes to his people and says, commit to me, stay with me, don't go anywhere. And then when those two things come together, the next thing he leads them into is an intimacy. And so this is another piece of where we're struggling to find our way in this world before he gets to the call of the prophets. God's called his people, and he says, hey, in all your struggle and all your challenge trying to find your way, let me give you this wisdom literature. Let me give you songs to sing because you're going to need to remember to sing. Let me give you wisdom to help you keep your path straight and understand how to find your way. And let me help you understand your purpose, Ecclesiastes, right? Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon, Song of Songs here. Hey, let me teach you how to love, how to remain. These are pieces of wisdom that are going to help us find our way in a world that keeps trying to point us in the wrong direction. And so we're going to continue to have some conversation. Thanks for joining us.